Team Talk. I'm delighted to have Camilla Rogers with me today. Welcome, Camilla.
Hello, James. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you on board. Camilla runs a mental health and wellbeing consultancy called 50/50, and their niche is actually prevention. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I've invited Camilla specifically to get a bit more under the skin in terms of not just fixing kind of mental fitness, but being proactive about it. So, Camilla, tell us, where do we begin with all this?
So, I think historically we've had quite a reactive approach, hence the sort of distinction around prevention for us. So, if you think about all the ways that we might now be talking about mental health, especially since COVID, there's a lot of conversation, but the support mechanism typically within the workplace is really reactive. So often companies have private medical insurance in which mental health support might be available, but that requires somebody to be at a position of going to the doctors to request a referral and kind of or asking for help, kind of because they've reached that point where it's got quite considerably life impacting and work impacting. Therefore, also the main programs within organisations tend to be employee assistance, mainly for the large organisations, and then in the smaller companies, you don't really see anything. It's kind of you react as and when something goes wrong, and you try and do your best with the tools that you have. There's been more of a recent emergence of something called mental health first aid, which is a program run by Mental Health England. And I've always been a little bit on the fence with that because I feel like it's a bit of a tick box. But I do think if it's run properly and you've got sort of ongoing support post training, that can create almost like the foundations for an organisation to get started around that conversation of mental health, which I think is really positive. So yeah, I think where we start with it is trying to be open around where we're at, looking at the team of people we have around us and acknowledging that, like physical health, we all have mental health, and then working to create a cultural conversation and a culture at work where people can start to open up and not feel the stigma that often shrouds getting support before it's too late.
That's interesting because you're absolutely right. But again, right to highlight that we all have mental health in the same way that we all have physical health. Some people are fitter than others in certain areas.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with mental health. We're all in a different state at certain times of the day or week or year or circumstances, aren't we?
Yeah. And we talk a lot about mental fitness at 50/50, so trying to give a different lens on it. So thinking like we think about our physical fitness, that we have to take proactive action, right? We have to go out and physically exercise. We have to watch what we eat if we want to maintain a certain figure. We have to maybe limit the consumption of things that are bad for us. But we have this consciousness around our physical well-being, which is innate, well known. Whether we follow it or not, that's a personal choice. But we have an innate awareness around it. And I think what we need to do is get employers to own that responsibility of creating a similar kind of weighting and consciousness around the mind almost being a muscle. And whilst it's not exactly a muscle, if we think of it like a muscle, we can flex it regularly to build its resilience, to build the strength, and enable us all to bounce back more quickly. And if you can equip yourself with tools and skills, which often is kind of the angle we push, is then therefore you're going to be able to better navigate challenges in the future when they come up.
That's interesting. You talk about building resilience. It's an often used word today. I hear it a lot. What does it really mean for you, Camilla, and
For
those
me,
that you help?
yeah, I'm not a lover of the term myself. I prefer the concept of bouncing back. That's the way I see it because I'm quite a visual person, so I like to visualize something. So my analogy would be the stretchy elastic band.
Yeah.
And we can all stretch. Now, some of us will be super stretchy because we've just got a natural ability to withstand more stress. And our probably, if you've ever done anything around the stress container, our stress container is much more, I guess, bigger. It's able to consume more issues that can kind of cause stress in people. Likewise, others will be shorter and kind of you will be stretched a little bit quicker or more soon than someone else. Recognizing what your own elastic band looks like. And what we don't want to be is get into a place where we're continually stretched to the point of almost breakdown and where we will feel brittle and snap. And that's where we can recognize red flags in our own mental well-being. Because I don't know about you, James, but for me, like I genuinely can see when I'm starting to veer off course. Whilst in business, it might be a good idea to go off and try different things and see what sticks. When it comes to our mindset, if we're starting to go down paths that we know are probably going to lead us to a place of burnout if we don't intervene, then we're going to get, those warning flags are there for a reason. A couple of mine would be like not exercising, for example, and starting to cut the exercise, starting to cut the healthy meals, starting to not see people, cancelling connection opportunities. When you're sort of going into that space, there are a few examples of my red flags. What are yours?
It's really interesting because you say that you can spot them, and generally, for the most part, I can. But it's not always been that way. From my own experience, you can get so consumed in your own life and looking after others or serving and supporting other people that sometimes you can forget to look inward, can't you? Is there anything that you would do? Because I've been through that.
Yeah,
So
no, I hear
I
you.
recognise it. But what advice would you give people that don't obviously take the time or don't obviously see, or actually they think they might, but actually,
I hear you. I think we're creatures of habit, right? So as humans, we like patterns and we like repetition, and it's kind of a psychological makeup that we like to do similar things. Like, we'll find ourselves walking into the bathroom and going to the same cubicle, or we'll go into a cafe area and we'll migrate to the same area that we sat in the last time. It's odd little things that we do that are kind of repeated.
yeah,
And I think that's the case. If we can look back at a time where we recognise that was a really challenging and ended in maybe a bad series of events, or maybe a moment in time where you reflect back and you can see, do you know what, I was really rock bottom then, or things were really tough for me then. If you can kind of, reverse engineer that journey and kind of look back at what happened in the run up to that and how you were living your life and what was beginning to happen, even if you're not particularly conscious of how you got there, you might start to see some of the flags that were kind of waving to you that you might not have seen. So a couple of the big ones are sleep. A lot of people start to really, really lose their ability to bounce back quickly when their sleep is deprived. We see a real impact on performance. There's also challenges around how we live our lives around community and connection. And, that isolation and loneliness is a really big factor. And for many of us post-COVID, in now hybrid working roles, or often if we're sort of smaller businesses and solopreneurs and like smaller kind of remote only offices, you can lose that connectivity. So if you find sort of the touch points when we're going wrong, and it ended wrong because you went through it, then you can kind of go back and say, do you know what, these are the things I must ensure don't happen. And the minute I see them starting to slide, I know my tendency is to do these things, therefore I'm going to stop them next time round. So it's almost like saying, I'm going to put a flag in the ground now and say, okay, this is my tendency. My tendency is to become more of a recluse, not exercise frequently, sit on my computer and overwork to eating into my sleep time. I'm going to have some firm boundaries around those 3 areas so I can't see myself.
you read my mind doing it. No, I don't. But yeah, these patterns do start to emerge, and it's often the people around you that see them first, don't they? Or have the implications of them upon them. So if you might have less sleep, you might be more irritable, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Both work and home life.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
This can apply to.
There's always a fallout. There's always collateral damage. Yeah, there's always something to. But if you're not able to get that feedback from someone else, you can tap in internally and you can find out. You've just got to listen. I think there's always a big difference between listening and hearing. Like we can all hear things. Do we actually really want to listen to them though? It's like. Obviously I say we can all hear, obviously there are people that can't hear, so with that caveat, what I'm trying to distinguish here is the fact that, are we going to be consciously tuning into some of these points that might be coming within our awareness spectrum? So
yeah, and I guess the further down, it's a bit of these things can spiral up or down, can't they? I guess the more tired, for example, you get, your ability to listen and hear and do something about it could diminish to the point of it becoming a problem or you burning out.
Yes, it's a reason why I'm a big fan of like micro moments. I talk a lot about having micro moments of positive.
What's a micro moment?
So if you just think, like, if you try and do all these goals, we've all got goals as coaches and as business owners. We all want to achieve certain things in life, but I think the small micro moments that make up your day are where you're going to have the big wins. So if you can factor in regular micro moments that are going to lead you towards your best physical and mental state, then they're going to be the ones that are going to help you to re-energize and recharge. So I'm a big fan of diary blocking, so I like to block out time, and I also put in time that might not be relevant to my business, but might be relevant to my son, might be relevant to his social calendar that's ever growing. It might be relevant to my exercise regime and things like that. But I also add in small little, windows where I should take a break, where I should go and sit outside for 15 minutes, and or I theme some of the activities I do week to week based on the topic to give my brain a different stimulation, and I kind of move to different spaces to do those tasks. So I think we can find small moments in each day that help to re-energize and replenish when we can easily just be sat there doing
I like
things.
that concept, and I guess if you're able to link that to your success, because I guess what goes on between these 6 inches has quite a profound effect on our performance, our happiness, everything as humans, doesn't it?
Hugely, hugely, and I think our own attitude towards ourselves is the most important thing, and we have to create a context in which we can thrive individually. Like, all of us will have different needs. You might need 6 hours sleep, I might need 9. So other people might need to run physically in the morning, others might look forward to it in the evening. We're all going to have different ways of showing up. But if we can work through what are the kind of non-negotiables for us to be in a place where we feel kind of like almost like the pillars of our well-being are supported, then we've got strong foundations on which we can build out, grow a business, have happy and meaningful relationships in our lives, go on the adventure or the journeys that we seek to do. All of what is meaningful and important to us can only happen if we create strong foundations. And it's what we work a lot with our coaching team, to kind of, when they go into organizations and work with employees in a confidential conversation of coaching. We call it mental fitness coaching. Nothing's off the table, everything is off the record. But what we're trying to do is say, we're not here to say it's got to be about work or it's got to be about your personal life. Often everything is interlinked. Let's just say let's just get to some of the root causes of what's going on for you. And because it's third party and we're not part of the company payroll structure, people open up and get there really quickly. And if you can be like that with yourself, and you can be your own coach, and you can kind of be really raw and authentic with yourself and write things down as you're feeling them, you can kind of coach yourself into this mindset.
Do you think some people need to do this positive stuff for themselves?
I think within a workplace, most certainly we need to create a culture of permission, and that often sits with management. And that's a controversial topic, because I see this emerging narrative around, new managers and the skilled manager, and the kind of now going into a people leadership role and not having those particular skills, driving the team as opposed to actually having technical knowledge. And I understand that. However, I feel like we all have it in us to be human. And I think it is a question of real coming back to basics. And rather than starting conversations around tasks, let's start conversations around how we are feeling, how we're doing, how we're spending our time at the moment. Let's start asking these questions to really get to know one another, and bringing that element of well-being in. So that starts to open that culture of permission, which we talk a lot about. And I think on an individual basis, I mean, you have the power, right? At work, it's harder because somebody else is controlling that context. If you're in a position where you report into someone.
It's interesting, because the way I often put it to the leaders is that their employees, beyond doing the basics, that means that they might get sacked, they have a choice about how much of themselves they bring to work, don't they? So if they are the best version that they could possibly be, in the best hygienic state that they can be, they're probably going to enjoy themselves more and get a better result for them in the business.
Oh, 100%, without shadow of a doubt. There are stats that Deloitte report every year that talk about exactly that. that link, the productivity, but also the ROI on intervention is really positive. It's over £5.30 for every £1 spent within an organisation for any kind of proactive and preventative support within the workplace for employee mental health specific. So there's a really good stats, and I think the biggest contributor, and this is where this ability to show up fully is put into question, the biggest contributor to the costs associated with mental health, which is like 50 billion a year in the UK, is ridiculously high costs. It goes up year on year. And most of it's attributed to sick leave, turnover. The biggest contributor is presenteeism.
Right.
Now, presenteeism is when we rock up to work, we're there, we're physical in body, but our mind is not fully on the job. And we've all, I mean, I definitely can, I'm sure you can, and I think most people can relate to times in their lives where they've just been fully occupied and immersed in what's going on at home or what's going on within their kind of world. That is totally irrelevant to work, but it occupies so much time and energy that you start to see a productivity lag. You start to see people taking more breaks, kind of leaving out, and kind of just not being supported in the right way. And when you've got that as your kind of crux within an organisation, especially if it's a smaller business, it starts to have dramatic impact on your bottom line. So what we need to do is we need to find ways to get into the moment before that person then continues down a spiral of decline into a space where they're then signed off for 6 weeks. You can't then hire to replace them. You're in a situation where you've got to pass that work on to someone else, do it yourself or whatever it might be, depending on your company size. Then you're in a problem. You've then got higher costs and putting pressure on more people. It can spiral. So we have to try and work really hard to try and identify those people that are struggling but are not mentally unwell. And this is the problem with mental health, is that there's a synonym, an invisible synonym out there, which is that mental health equals mental illness, and that's incorrect. It doesn't. As we said earlier, we all have mental health. So the point is that can we recognise that all of us are on a sliding scale, and some days we'll be really strong and other days we'll probably feel less strong, but we'll never be the same every single day because it's dynamic and we move and it depends on what's going on around us. But if we're getting into a space where we're starting to struggle, probably linked to stuff that's going on around us, either with a relationship within the workplace, an inability to do the job or task, or something personal, usually it's one of the three. It can be a relationship with a manager or it could be a relationship with a partner, for example, but it will be something around a relationship. How then do we kind of equip them with the skills to overcome this, build the strengths to kind of work through it and then get out the other side? And this is why we're so passionate about that mental fitness coaching rather than the therapy. When you've reached the point of no return and then the therapy comes in, that's the reactive element. So what we're trying to say to organisations, just think a little bit further along that curve before people enter the space where it's going to be obvious that they're struggling.
And most people, or the majority, would never get mental ill health. Now, some people that can't be prevented for different reasons, but most people would never need to get there if they did the right proactive steps in the right environment for them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't probably comment on that. So my view is that we all have it. So I think we all experience it. So I genuinely think that we'll all experience a bit of depression, a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress, and that is poor mental health. That is us not feeling tip top. It's like when we're not feeling physically well, we know that we're not, but we're not saying that we're dying and we're physically ill. Therefore, and we're not in those spaces of being really dramatic with our language when it comes to physical unwellness or illness, as I should say. But it's the same, but we've got this mental kind of block around mental health where we think, not all of us are ill, or not all of us are diagnosed or, medically diagnosed as having a disorder or a condition or an illness. But actually, there's a broad spectrum here and most of us are somewhere on it. So I would probably take the lens that we all have it, and it has the potential to get quite serious for quite a number of people if the right skills aren't in place in order for people to better manage it. Because all of us have got a breaking point, every single one of us.
We're all human to some degree. What I'm suggesting is there's loads of potential out there to actually look after people's mental fitness. I love your term, because that's actually better for them and ultimately better for the productivity of the business, surely.
Well, exactly, and that's what we want. We want companies that can withstand difficult times, that might have to make difficult decisions and make redundancies and change up product lines and do things that are going to have an impact on people, and that's going to happen. That is business. but how can you support your people and how can you keep them, able to bounce back through these journeys and through these touch points as you grow better. And, you want them to be coming to work happy, energized, creative, thoughtful, engaged, and most of all, loyal. The cost of, hiring someone and getting them up to scratch to where they need to be in order to deliver the work you need them to deliver is it's a lot of money. The average cost is over £30,000 per person, and that doesn't take into account senior leadership roles or management roles. This is just looking at an average wage. So somewhere like London, for example, you would see that cost to be significantly higher per person. And then you have all the stress around that person and getting that right culture match for your organisation. So it's absolutely fundamental to create a sticky culture. And more people now are putting their hand out and saying, we want something that's well-being. We're not really worried so much about the physical pay of the job. We're more interested in, what can you do for me that's going to support me as a human? What programs have you got in place? What learning am I going to experience? What well-being support can I expect? How are you going to treat me if I'm unwell, physically or mentally? All of these things are such an important conversation, especially for Gen Z who are coming through into the market and very clear on what they need.
I'm glad they're openly asking, aren't they? They're really supporting the human race almost going forward.
Mm.
So you talked about presenteeism. What can a leader, if they suspect that, what can they do?
I think it all starts with communication. I think what people tend to do is hide behind reports and stats and figures, whereas I think actually you need to have an open heart-to-heart conversation with someone and say, look, I noticed that things aren't, looking quite the same as they were maybe 6 months ago. Should we have a chat about how you're doing? And try and take the conversation around performance to the side for now and focus on meeting that person where they are and just hearing them and listening to what they have to say. So asking a lot of opens, focusing on what they're going through. If it gets to a place where they can open up and share where they're at, brilliant. Listen more than you speak, 80-20 rule, really let them have the floor, because this probably won't happen over an email exchange. So you would have to have created some time to come together face to face, ideally, if Zoom, if not. And then you want to be kind of asking questions like, can you help me understand how you perform at work? And like, when you're struggling, what are your tells? If you try to imagine yourself trying to, work out every single person in your team and their behavior, it's going to be a challenge. But if they can tell you, look, right, my tendency when I'm struggling, I kind of shut down. I don't really attend the team socials. I'm probably going to turn my camera off when I'm on a meeting unless I'm told not to. And if you can kind of get into a rapport where you can find these out, that's really helpful. And I also think you should be asking how you can support them. So asking them, what do they want from you? Finding out from them, how can you communicate and how frequently would you like that to be in order to support you? So trying to create like a joint plan of action that has got more input from your staff member. And then building in wellbeing and genuine questions about how people are doing into the everyday work agendas. So thinking about that we're all different about how we want to share and stuff, but finding a way to not just go straight to task, because I think that can be quite demoralizing.
Yeah, and different people behave in different ways. We do a lot of disc analysis, for example, and some people are very, very task focused. Others are naturally more personal. I guess recognising your own natural styles and how you might need to adapt them is important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And also trying to find cool ways to engage your own team based on your own world, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whatever it is you're doing. And, if you're in an operations role, how can you create those small wins every day? How can you take away and how can you bring some reflection practice into your weeks and your months and your quarters, so you can kind of look back and celebrate what's great, but also leave behind what you don't want to bring forward with you. And I think that's a good way of shedding the weight we all carry with us week to week if things that go wrong, and actually having a really nice, clear ending to a week and being able to just come together even for 20 minutes over half an hour on Zoom and say, look, this is what we're really proud about this week. This is what has not gone so well. What are we not taking forward with us mentally? And sort of creating mental space is like it's a really undervalued or underused kind of free skill we all have. Like we all have the ability to let things go. It's a choice. It's a choice as to how we choose to think. So if we can bring that collectively into the team environment and say, actually, you know, what do we collectively need to let go of to like clear our mental headspace so we can move forward, that would be really powerful for the team to start getting into the habit of focusing on the wins, but also recognizing what's happened, what's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong, but then leaving it there.
Yeah, because that can happen in a lot of businesses. There's a lot of focus on staff and kind of win, which can neglect how people are feeling or
Mm.
the what some may describe as softer sides. Let's use some of the language we probably hear in business um, these days. But how would you say? You know, would you say, for example, that empathy should be up there as the top trait as a leader these days?
Say that again. Sorry, what was the question?
Would you say that empathy should be up
Oh,
there as
empathy.
a top leadership trait now?
Personally, yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's important in any relationship to have a level of empathy. I think there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy, and I
Yeah,
think there's a lack of understanding there generally, and people assume empathy is getting on board and really feeling the feelings of the other person, but it's not. It's a different style of you know, and a leader who's empathetic is going to be somebody who can see a perspective that's not their own, who can feel, who can probably bring a feeling of alignment towards the rest of the team who might be feeling a certain way, can kind of step into their shoes momentarily and can kind of flip the lens so that they're kind of aligned to where they're at, but they're not going to take it on
yeah,
emotionally and then be sort of dragged down by it. So I think it's a really powerful trait in leadership that's definitely more popular as a topic now, isn't it? Like to talk about having empathy within the leadership teams, whereas
yeah.
historically it's been all about, you know, deliverables and results.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, empathy, vulnerability is the other word that is
Yeah,
is used a
and
lot. And
I think that's really important from a role modeling standpoint. So you can't role model effectively if you're shut down around your empathy and your vulnerability because you're basically not relatable.
I,
So how can a human follow in your footsteps if they can't relate to you, if they see you as a bit of a robot and they see you as someone that's got, you know, no emotions?
absolutely, and it's quite an interesting area because it's often the kind of leaders and middle management that are under quite a bit of stress because they're managing up and down, particularly if they're new. They've got it's new roles and opportunities for them.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of what we're saying in terms of being empathetic, taking time to listen to your team, see how they feel, is it's harder work for some people. Everyone's capable of doing it, but for some people it's another thing to do if they had
Yeah.
time.
I
How
think we're all capable. I think it's whether we have the competence. I know a lot of leaders in business that just aren't wired that way, and that's okay. But it's going to have a different. They're going to have different skill set to draw out the kind of union within the team and the success. I mean, if you've got other skills, you know, not every team, I guess, and every business area needs to demonstrate the same skill set. But I do think that you've got to kind of overcompensate. If you haven't got any of those key, if you're not able to role model effectively and you're not very relatable, you're going to have to be a bloody good technical expert and have some sort of, you know, I don't know, real, I guess, loyalty from your existing team that just love you and get on because you're great at what you do, but they're giving you a little bit of freedom there because you're not so great at the leadership. And I
yeah,
think that is that we don't have that so much in organisations as we're growing and as businesses grow, is that you get new people coming in, and those skills around leadership are just as important around as the technical skills that we need to deliver forward.
does a leader need to sort them? You know, if their mental fitness is at a lower level than ideal to perform their role, do they need to sort themselves out first?
I mean, there's the whole analogy, isn't there? Put your own oxygen mask on first, and it's true with this as
Absolutely.
well. Like you have to sort of have some sort of understanding. Like we've partnered with loads of companies where people have been like, you know, they might be in billable hour cultures where there's no time for well-being, there's no time for the soft stuff, and you know they are cynical to say the least. But they come out of a couple of hours on a training that we might do around mental health awareness and kind of walking that well-being talk yourself and how important it is to you for them to drive your team results. And actually, they'll turn around and say, God, that was actually a real eye opener. I had no idea really how my performance and how what I'm doing is really filtering down to the rest of the team. I think there's a level of unconsciousness sometimes, or, preferably I would like to think it's just a lack of awareness, but sometimes I think it can be a choice as to like, that's not what I want to do. And I do think that we, as leaders in organisations, we have a duty of care to drive forward an agenda where we can get people on board for the right reasons and also support them. And if we're role modelling terribly by texting or WhatsApping at midnight or on Saturdays, we're not allowing people to take breaks. We're putting on a load of lunch and learns about burnout during the lunch break. Don't get me started on things like that. All this toxic culture around let's have a positive well-being, but the only thing we're really going to do is, tick a box here and then carry on to hound you. You can't grow my favourite analogy that I love to use, you can probably tell I like an analogy, you can't grow a mango tree in Iceland. And a lot of these team cultures and these mini cultures within the organisation, you can have the best mission statement, have the best values, you can have a real great intent from the top down. If your levers of change, your managers are not creating the right cultural context for people to thrive within, and they're not role modelling effectively and they're not demonstrating how to, then you're not going to be able to deliver as a business on any of those aspirational goals or any of those dreams of your culture. It just won't happen. Yeah. So we talk about when we partner with organisations, it's very much around that cultural context. Can we grow our mango trees here from 50-50 in your auction? Because if we go in and do all that beautiful work with the individuals and do some stuff with managers, but things aren't happening at the top level, for example, then that's not going to help either. So it's another reason why 50-50 is named that way. One is about physical health and mental health, and they're the same but different. And that's why we have numeric 50 and written. The other one is because it's a meeting halfway of both the employer stroke the employee. And you have to meet halfway on these journeys to make that effort, to create that culture, to live it, and then to take responsibility for mental health.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I love that. I love that analogy. I've not heard the mango tree in Iceland before. Yeah, I guess you could if you created the right conditions. And that's
I think everyone
point,
can.
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So from a leader's perspective, I guess there's a certain amount of duty of care that they can have to themselves and their team. How much responsibility is this? If we were talking about physical health, then there's a lot of onus on the individual for that. How much responsibility has one got to take for their own mental health?
Well, I think we all have ultimate responsibility over our own mental health, and it's our own. We need to own it, and we need to work to build our own mental health in the same way that we build and look after our own physical health. I think when you're spending a lot of time within one place, which is work, there's a duty of care of the employer to provide some form of support. That's the downfall. So if you've got a high pressure culture, if you've got big aspirations, if you've got big teams and it's hard to kind of create that family energy, maybe you do need third party support to come in and kind of help you retain that culture and help your people to grow. But I do think even in the companies we partner with, the language we use around it is, the company are providing this opportunity for you to have your confidential coaching with 50-50, say, for example, but you need to do the doing. It's not, we're going to help create the opportunity for you to do it and invest in you, and we care about your well-being to a point where we don't mind what you talk about, and we're going to do it on company time and dime. But it's on you to book it, it's on you to follow up with it, it's on you to get out of it what you want from it. And those that do, literally, we had a piece of feedback through today, it was like life-changing. It really is, because if you can kind of get into a habit of working through emotions that you typically try and box off, that means you're coming into work with all of that mental space occupied by stuff you're dealing with. You can't free it up for the job. And so we're helping most organisations tackle the presenteeism and alleviate the potential absenteeism because of that exact point of meeting in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're not going to do something about it and recognise it or make change, then you can hardly expect someone else to, can you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other? You've mentioned a few as we've gone through today. Are there any other misconceptions that we think you need to publicly bust that you hear a lot?
covered them around the reactivity being the answer. I think it's really important that companies move away. We've evolved significantly over the last 50 years, but we're still using employee assistance programs, EAPs, as the backbone of our mental health strategy in most organizations. And that's a program that came about in the 1950s in America that was originally called an occupational assistance program, an OAP. And it was post-war America where there was a dearth of male labour, and therefore they had to reach out to the population of drunken men who were really struggling with alcoholism. In manufacturing and working, they were all kind of sat there, kind of drunk on the job. And they had no choice. There was no one else to bring in. And this is how, this is what the research shows. And so they had this occupational assistance program set up internally in all these organizations over in the States to help these people work through alcoholism. And it was an offshoot of AA back then. And as time has evolved since the 50s, we've kind of broadened them out. They've become all employee servicing, and they've often now been outsourced. But they are reactive at the point where most people that will go in now and pick up that phone and get one of those counselling sessions, and it's not as easy as that, by the way.
Yeah.
You get engagement rates of around 10% in organisations of people that will actually ever walk towards it and use the service.
Right.
And of those 10%, roughly about 20% will ever actually get through the assessment to receive a counselling session. So if you think about your working population, of which we know most of them will probably be suffering at some point with presenteeism, all we're really doing with those models is providing support for those who have got to a rock bottom, who are therefore now needing this because they've got no other option. And even those members will probably not get the right support because they'll either get into the system and be told to go and use some online resources, or they'll be in a space where they're being kind of forced, square peg round hole, because these are not individualized solutions. So we need to shift our mindset from that reactive, historic way of doing things. That's okay to have as part of a strategy, but what can we do as a business to keep ourselves really nimble and really able to grow and hold on to our talent and attract new talent? It has to be something in that middle space around prevention.
How would you start if you haven't got anything in the prevention? What advice would you give to
Could
business?
start with probably getting a couple of mental health first aiders and wellbeing champions within your business to start opening conversations up. And some of those should be managers and leaders. We run programs where we do the full Mental Health England training, but we also bring group coaching forward as an annual program. So you would have the training, which for the official certification is a couple of days. Then you can do a half day or a 1 day training for some of the other courses if you wanted to have some other members of the team. If you're a large organisation trained as a champion or general mental health awareness. These are slightly, more affordable programs if you're just starting out. Therefore, it's a good starting place. But also, what it doesn't do is it doesn't integrate the learning into the day job, and it doesn't hold people who are going through difficult conversations with their staff, because the whole concept of mental health first aid is when somebody within the workplace is struggling, they're going to hopefully go and pick out one of these mental health first aiders to talk to. I'd say research would say that they don't really want to bear all to someone internally, be it a colleague, superior, or someone in HR that might have an influence. However, lots of companies are doing it. So our perspective is, if you're going to do it properly. So learn how to integrate it and make sure your people are supported. Those that have gone through that training, if they are having sex, how do they then process that conversation? Are you leaving them with these very deep conversations where they're taking on outside of their day job mental health struggles from others, and they're not trained professionals? And in therapy and coaching, you have something called supervision, which you'll be aware of.
Yeah.
And you don't have that in mental health first aid. So we're creating that. So at 50/50, we have a program that delivers the training, but also delivers an annual program of group coaching to give people that space to integrate the role and also do that. And I think that is where companies should start at the very basics of starting to open up the conversation, talk more broadly about mental health and wellbeing within the workplace, bring in the manager wellbeing conversations that we talked about earlier, start to bring those open conversations in and ask questions. And you can do a lot with a limited budget there, and then you can build out the preventative support and create the ecosystem that you need.
It seems at face value, I welcome your expertise on this, that just equipping the leaders with a bit more knowledge and awareness, some of the points you've already covered, if everyone had a heightened awareness with no stigma attached to mental fitness,
Mm-hmm.
and a few things that they could do, that would have a huge effect in the workplace, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the manager training element is massive. Like I said, there are levers of change. There are people that are going to role model and are going to influence. They're the ones that are going to make something happen or not happen. So I think it's cool that we don't do when it comes to manager training, we really kind of bespoke that, and we listen to what the problems are. We get the survey out, we kind of understand where the kind of pain points are, and then we design training to meet those needs, because every organization will have different challenges that they're facing, as you'll know. So I think you're right. You've got to get the infrastructure in place in order for well-being to thrive, and there's no point doing all this work at the top or even supporting at the bottom level if you've got your middle management in a place where they're blocking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, at its absolute most basic level, if a leader watching this was to do some form of okay, well, a real take take five and have a depth look at themselves to see where they are on that spectrum themselves, and take action towards it, and just do one thing to better understand the team, then already for a lot of people that would be the beginning of a new momentum.
Absolutely. And I think if you can kind of build on that and bring everybody in and get some skin in the game within the team, you can start to create that momentum more quickly. And I think it's things are a bit easier when everybody is a little bit more open, and that vulnerability creeps in, and people start to share their struggles, share their journey with being neurodivergent, or share their journey with experiencing chronic ill health, or whatever it might be. Opening up about being a real human creates opportunity to relate to someone and connect with them. And you start to have an emotional connection to someone, and that becomes a more deep rooted relationship than just performance related conversation.
Interesting. Clearly, we're connected on the same path of kind of celebrating the human within people. I've got. I'm not expecting you to have a perfect answer to this question. This is an opinion kind of question. But we're on the cusp of another sort of technical shift, aren't we? With AI coming through, it's going to impact everyone's lives in some shape or form. And I often look at it a bit like the mobile phone, the smartphone, because we had a choice when that came in terms of how it's going to impact our lives. 'Cause on one hand, there's loads of pluses. You've got a computer that's more powerful than the one that got them to the moon and back in the first round, but it has had various consequences on us as humans, be they
Yeah.
addiction or the extension of working place in hours and,
Yeah.
and practices. So that was phones as my illustration. AI coming upon us now. What are your thoughts? What are your first thoughts on how we can get that to work for us, not necessarily against us as humans?
So I would say this isn't probably not my area of expertise. I think it's going to shake things up, and I think there's going to be lots of jobs created from it, but there'll be lots of shifts around how things are done. Within the realm of mental health, I talk to a lot of people about AI and virtual reality and kind of different ways to engage different demographics with regards to getting the support they need. And I can't see an AI sing personally the human to human contact that we need in order to get through deep challenges. I can, however, see sometimes, and I've had a really interesting conversation recently with a lady who's doing something for children's mental health, and they're using like AI and avatars and cute kind of like superhero figures to help children identify with their emotions, kind of recognize when they're struggling with their mental health. And I can see something like that being appealing. I can't see it being appealing to an adult in the same way. I think it is kind of very much in the child space. Look, I'm probably, just sharing a personal opinions here now. I don't really have a strong one. I just feel like there's going to be so much that's going to emerge very, very, very quickly. And as businesses, we need to be able to adapt and listen and hear what's right. But I think you've got to go with what your business does. Like my business is human to human, but we're all digital. We do stuff in person, but we've still got a screen between us half the time. Very open to what the future holds for that, if it's the right thing. And I think we just have to give it a little bit of time to to see what's coming through, because I think, especially in the world of coaching and therapy, it's, you know, training to maybe to a lesser extent. It's just such in our world of mental health, it's such personal. You need that trust.
Hoping that we make a choice that gets AI to do boring, time-consuming stuff more efficiently than humans can do, because it can.
Yeah.
That then enables us to have more proper human conversations on the things that only we can do.
Yeah. Time will tell.
Well, indeed, I wasn't expecting an answer on that, but thank you very much for
No
sharing
worries.
your opinion, and more importantly, thank you for sharing your expertise and top tips in terms of how leaders can really proactively go about managing their and their team's mental fitness. Let me get the word right.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Before you go, I ask everyone this: have you got a book recommendation? What have you read recently, Camilla?
I love Chris Voss, who's the ex-FBI agent, and
Oh
his
yeah,
Never Seen the Difference. I really enjoyed that book. I think I just love how he's kind of applying all what he learned at the Samaritans and all his training to be a hostage negotiator into the business world. I just thought it was really fascinating, and it just really grabbed me. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
that's a good one. Thank you very much indeed again
No worries.
for joining us today. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.